everyone, welcome to Deep Dives with Dogs. Today we're going to kind of start to talk about the start of animation, and really can't talk about that without talking about the one, the only Walt Disney. So animation, it's been around for technically a long time, um, depending on where you want to look. You could look back at ancient sources, or you could look at only the sense of movies and modern sense. Um, it's just hard to say. Animation is just the moving of pictures um, on a screen, but not necessarily on a screen. Just the moving of pictures. That's an animation. Um, Obviously nowadays there are movie studios creating animations constantly all across the world. But animation existed in ancient times as well by something as simple as drawing a picture and moving the picture very quickly. Now, it wouldn't create the same idea that we have today, but still could be considered it. Um, but with modern animation, you can't help but mention one figure, that being, of course, Walt Disney. Disney has influenced, well, basically everyone in terms of influence. Not necessarily himself, yes, of course, himself, but his company, of course, the Disney Company. Um, the one that bears his name, of course. Even all the way in the east, so far east, like Japan or China and things like that, a lot of animation can be rooted back to Walt Disney. If you ask some of the very old timing animators of Japan, some that are really getting up there in age, and if they're still around, definitely try to hear their stories. Very interesting. But they'll talk about how they were influenced by Disney, by the old American rubber hose animation, that time period. You get people like, obviously, the stuff that Disney created. You get other studios in there. It's very interesting style of animation. Kind of seeing somewhat of a small resurgence. People just like that old style of rubber hose. But so we get a lot of cartoon characters doing really goofy things. You also get people like Warner Bros. In there at that around the same time. So very interesting. But of course, we can't talk about animation without, of course, we mentioned Disney, but not just him, but his creations. And obviously his probably most famous creation being Mickey Mouse. But Mickey Mouse was created a little bit earlier than most people might think. His first public screening of Mickey himself is Steamboat Willie, and most people would know that. But there is actually an animation with him and Minnie, who were both created in 1928. Well, not created then, but their first on-screen appearance is in 1928. But it wasn't a wide distribution to the public at first. It was just a small silent test, basically to try to secure funding, more or less, is what this would be for. And it would eventually get that, but it would be after Steamboat Willie had been shown to the world. Um, but this film is about um, Minnie and Mickey on a plane that Mickey had built at his house, and he's trying to romance her the whole time. Because of course, Mickey loves Minnie and her the same. At least that was the idea. By Disney originally. Now, if that's what the Disney company thinks now, hard to say. But that was obviously the original intent. You get a lot of people. You get the girls being like, oh, it's a female. Of course, that was the idea. And then there's a male that's trying to woo the girl, and that's very um, striking for many men, especially at this time. The time it's created, 1928. So, but really can't imagine a world without these titular characters and without obviously the man that created them, the men that created them, I should say, because more than just Disney himself. uh, and it'd be very interesting to see where animation would have come, or would have gone, I should say, if not for Walt Disney. I think eventually animation would have taken off. Of course, the idea of an animated picture, it's not impossible to think people would want that because, well, like I said, animation has technically and in some ways been around for a long, long time. And they make good stories for children. Children like colors, bright colors especially, and animation hits to a more childlike setting, you could say. But obviously, animation is not only for children. There can be animation for adults as well. I mean, we've seen that more recently, in more recent times. But um, all the influence that Disney has had can also be looked at not just things like Steamboat Willie or, well, Steamboat Willie and the creation of Mickey, but also what he does with feature length animation. So before, stuff like Steamboat Willie and other animations were more short films, things you would play kind of before a movie. A lot of times they would do that, um, or it would be in an ensemble thing where there's a bunch of these videos that wouldn't be very long, just something kind of small. However, Walt Disney does help with the feature length side of animation, where Snow White proves that a whole movie, uh, animated, can succeed and will succeed spectacularly. Obviously, Disney has not necessarily treated their first princess very well in more recent times, but you really can't undersell how important to movies, to animation, Snow White really is. She is one of the most important cartooned characters to ever exist, and probably can remain that way. Honestly, um, not probably, she will, but you really can't remove feature-length animation from Snow White. Very, very important. But animation today, definitely a different spot. I wonder what a lot of these guys that created it way back when, or got it to where it is, I should say, would think of it now. Hard to say. Maybe they'd love it. Maybe they would hate it. But it's only for them to know, right? Now, that's going to do for this video. If you guys liked the video, leave a like. If you have any ways to improve the videos, leave a comment down below. I always appreciate your feedback. And as always, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Thank you.